Jimmy Kimmel told his audience on Wednesday that he might need their help once again as he faces new guidance from the Federal Communications Commission. Let's take a listen.
The president took time from 6,000 miles away to continue his war on talk shows. He shared this story about how his minions at the FCC are planning to make it difficult for shows like ours and The View to interview politicians they don't align with. For real, we are once again getting threatened by the FCC. I might need your help again, okay?
The FCC's Media Bureau issued a public notice on Wednesday stating that it will not exempt late night and daytime talk shows from requiring to provide equal airtime to opposing political candidates.
The notice said it is important that both broadcasters and legally qualified candidates understand the FCC's equal opportunities regulations and how they can result in broadcasters offering opposing legal qualified candidates comparable time and placement. The FCC has not been presented with any evidence that the interview portion of any late-night or daytime television talk show program on air presently would qualify for the bona fide news exemption. Moreover, a program that is motivated by partisan purposes, for example, would not be entitled to an exemption under long-standing FCC precedent.
Well, I think they should be separated. Like if we talk about The View and Kimmel, let's just look at ABC because that's the example we have. The View seems more like the FCC might have a reasonable argument there, right? They should provide equal airtime. Most of the show is about politics. I think when you talk about Kimmel and shows similar to that, they've been under the entertainment divisions of their companies for like more than 20 years in that capacity, meaning that they don't even look at those as news shows. And the FCC hasn't for more than 20 years look at things like Jay Leno or Colbert as news shows. And so to put this onus on it, late night talk show to now become a news show, although I think that they should invite candidates from both sides of the aisle and not even just be a political show, people with different perspectives, podcasters, actors that have all different perspectives. And maybe they should not get into politics as much. I'm actually over some of the jokes about President Trump. It's constant and continuous. But I don't think that we should start to nitpick at some of these late night shows because now we just have the FCC or Trump adjacent people deciding what should be satire, deciding what comedy should be. And I think that's like a step too far. Now, The View is not comedy. The View is usually political or entertainment, and I think that that might be a different conversation.
Yeah, it's a bit nuanced here because the reason this exemption came into place was because in 2006, Jay Leno had an interview portion of his show where he would have Arnold Schwarzenegger, the governor of California, on, and that was billed as a bona fide news interview, which is why he didn't have to adhere to the equal time clause. But the argument is that if Jimmy Kimmel has an interview section that is more entertainment driven, isn't a bona fide news interview, and he's only applying those time slots to Democrat politicians or people of the left, you know, just looking through recent YouTube clips, he's had Rachel Maddow, Eric Swalwell, Pete Buttigieg, etc., Kamala Harris, then that might not qualify for the exemption. And so maybe he needs to reapply for that to see whether or not this actually qualifies under the FCC statutes.
And if we continue to politicize the FCC, then I think that conservatives are aware of this. When you have a different leader of the FCC in place that aligns more with whomever the next Democratic president is, like this turns right back on conservative radio hosts or talk shows. And I think that they probably wouldn't want...
Well, only if they're on broadcast, right?
And you wouldn't want that. CBS owns an entire slew of radio content. You know, like these are the same companies that produce, you know, the same, hold themselves to the same standards and have entertainment programming that kind of leads into news a little bit and will continue to create this. I mean, major companies that are outside of the big 3 or 4 networks will continue to create broadcast content. The Hill is owned by Nexstar that will continue to create content. So if we start to comb through every single thing, I mean, this can go both ways where they start to criticize, well, this is not looking equal under the guise of somebody who works or aligns themselves with whomever the next president is that's Democratic.
Yeah, I mean, this would apply specifically to the late night and entertainment shows, though, right? Because the radio programs that we're talking about already classify as bona fide news interviews when they have a politician on. Same with something like CBS Nightly News or one of those evening or morning news programs. Those already qualify for the
Jimmy Kimmel
exemption.
mentioned The View, which is not late night. It's a daytime talk show and all talk shows.
Yeah, like I said, late night talk shows and entertainment shows, I would say The View is more entertainment because they have, you know, their shopping segments or they have lifestyle type segments, pop culture, as opposed to just politics. They like to talk about politics a lot, but I don't think it classifies the same way that a morning news program would, like Good Morning America, for example. And so I do think it's a little bit cloudy and muddy there on where exactly they classify and whether or not they qualify for this bona fide news exemption. And so I think it's reasonable to try to clarify what exactly those categories of interviews fall under, because if they don't qualify for that exemption, then they would have to satisfy that equal time requirement.
The criticism also comes from the timing. I mean, we know what just happened with Jimmy Kimmel. We know how that entire saga played out for him, which is what he kind of made light of. But I think that both sides of the aisle almost came together in the issue. I mean, there were people on the outskirts that were saying, yeah, take Kimmel off air, maybe because you don't like his personal show, but don't think the FCC should have been involved. So for this to come on the back end of that, it feels targeted and intentional, and adding to this crusade against media that we talked about a little bit earlier, like suing the New York Times for the polling or recently suing CBS. And so it's natural for people to question why all this is happening now after 20 years of precedent where there wasn't any issues with some of these late night shows.
I do think it's understandable to question the motivations. I do think looking back at Brendan Carr's public statements, even before he took over the FCC, it was pretty clear that he wanted to be a more active member of the FCC, that he wanted to revisit some of these classifications and guidelines that the FCC has been operating under sort of on sleepwalk mode for the past 20 to 30 years. And so even though the Jimmy Kimmel specific inclusion does seem like it could be targeted by political motivations, it's also not out of bounds from what he has previously promised to do, even before there was this issue with Trump and Kimmel.
Yeah, we're going to have to keep watching this to see what else they come up with. Up next, an American tennis star refused to denounce the U.S. after a reporter tried to nudge her to do it at the Australian Open. We'll be right back after this.